जॉर्ज 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 हेलो, कैसे हो सभी लोग? कोई देख नहीं रहा लेकिन फिर भी वेलकम एवरीवन टू द स्ट्रीम। अगर कोई रिपीट में देखता है तो ठीक है, वैसे तो कोई देखता है नहीं मेरी स्ट्रीम, मेरे को पता है स्किप करके सब जाएंगे, लेकिन फिर भी यस। और मैं पहले इंट्रो दिया लेकिन अभी जाके नोटिस किया मैंने कि मेरा माइक म्यूटेड था। सो यस अगेन कर दिया इंट्रो। सो फिलहाल करेंगे अनबॉक्सिंग इस पैकेज का, तो मेरे को बहुत बेसब्री से इंतज़ार था। डीएम ब्रो। और चलते हैं मैं स्विच करता हूँ। ये हो गया स्विच। लेकिन मेरे को आई गेस एक वो बनाना पड़ेगा, न्यू सीन क्रिएट करता हूँ वेबकैम का, और इसमें मेरे को वो ऐड करना है एलिमेंट एंड वीडियो कैप्चरिंग डिवाइस, ऐड सोर्स फुल। ओके, बिकॉज आई एम हैप्पी। अच्छा, मैं अपना वाईफाई नहीं, मेरे अपने इंटरनेट से मैं अपलोड कर रहा था, इसीलिए इतना प्रॉब्लम हो रहा था। यस मैं कैमरा को पोजीशन चेंज करूँ क्या? चेंज माय कैमरा पोजीशन। अरे बाबा आजा 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 प्यार, इसका भी टाइपो हुआ है तेरी तो अरे 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 जिग 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 जिग। तो ये रहा पैकेज। अनबॉक्स करते हैं। ये एंगल बहुत बेकार है। अरे यार रुको। जिग जिग। ट्राइपॉड सेट करने दो मेरे को। और तो सम हैप्पी सेट कर दिया। और आउ ये रहना इसकी कीड़ी। मच बेटर। ये रहा पैकेज, और एक अच्छे से लोफी सॉन्ग प्ले कर देते हैं। मम मम मम, ये बजा देता हूँ, ये मैं सुन रहा था।
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.
बड़े लोग नहीं गाते रहते से नया माउस भेजाओ, मेरा ही वापस माउस करके ना कर। एक्चुअली मेरा नया माउस नहीं है, आई बॉट दिस माउस चेंज में, और 1-2 महीने में ख़राब हो गया था, मतलब 2 महीने नहीं 3 महीने में, लास्ट अप्रैल में ख़राब हो गया था। तो आई सेंड देम बैक, नहीं मार्च में ख़राब, मार्च के एंडिंग में ख़राब हो गया था शायद से, मैंने उन्हें अप्रैल में वापस भेज दिया। ओ भाई नया माउस, नया गाइस, नया गाइस, मेरी आवाज़ आ रही है, उल्टा लिखा होगा, ये रहा, 'cause I'm happy। ये रहा, this mouse। मेरे को तो गाइस स्कैम लग रहा है।
बिना विज्ञापन योग की वीडियो देखें और बिना रुकावट प्रैक्टिस करें। YouTube प्रीमियम मुफ्त आजमाएं।
I'll smile, I know what it takes to fool this town. I'll do it till the sun goes down and all through the night time. Oh yeah, I'll tell you what you wanna hear. Keep my sunglasses on while I shed a tear. It's never the right time. Yeah. I put my arm around so you how strong I am. I put my arm around, I show you that I am. I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm invincible. Yeah, I win every single game. I'm so powerful. I don't need batteries to play. I'm so confident. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today. Break down, only alone I will cry out now. You'll never see what's hiding out deep down. Yeah. I know I've heard that to let your feelings show is the only way to make friendships grow, but I'm too afraid now. Yeah. I put my arm around, show you how strong I am. I put my arm around, I'll show you that I am. I'm
Unstoppable। ये वाली प्लेलिस्ट नहीं लेकिन अब ये
रात की गहरी नींदों में मैं सो न पाई, दर्द में क्यों खुद को ही यूं तड़पाई। रात की गहरी नींदों में मैं सो न पाई, दर्द में क्यों खुद को ही यूं तड़पाई। मैंने कभी ना सोचा तुझे, बस रोया यूं ही खुद से, यूं दिल को मैंने रोया तुझे ढूंढ ढूंढे, रोया था मैं तू ना मिला, गहरी सी इन रातों में
इसका तो काम नहीं है, इसका देखो।
सोया ना था मैं, रोता था तेरी याद में वो ही रात। कहीं तो होगी वो,
प्लीज इस बार खराब ना करियो, मतलब मेरे पैसे वेस्ट हो जाएंगे।
जहाँ मैं
ये स्टिकर तो दे दिया करो अभी नो। दिया गाइस, दिया स्टिकर।
बस तेरे मेरे जज्बात
साला यूजुअली बनता है ये तो। वैसे ये मैनुअल है लेकिन अपने काम की नहीं है, इसको वापस साइड एक बार देखना तो कैसे पैकेजिंग है। अगर वापस भेजाऊँ ना तो दिक्कत वाली बात है। ऑन स्ट्रीम खोलने का फ़ायदा है, अगर कुछ डैमेज भी निकला ना तो मैं उनको वापस बता भी सकता हूँ।
ख्वाहिशें जो थी मेरी बस तुझको पाने की,
नो लुक्स लाइक ऑल राइट,
वही मेरी
कुछ बिगड़ा हुआ तो नहीं है। इसकी
जो थी मेरी बस
नाइस हो,
तुझको पाने
एक रह गया।
ख्वाहिश
जब मैं इसको लाइटिंग ऑन करता हूँ
मेरी बस ख्वाहिश ही रह गई। मैंने कभी ना छोड़ा तुझे, बस रोया यूं ही खुद से, यूं दिल को मैंने रोया तुझे ढूंढ ढूंढे, रोया था मैं तू ना मिला, गहरी सी इन रातों में सोया ना था मैं, रोता था तेरी याद में वो ही रात। कहीं तो है नशा तेरी मेरी हर मुलाकात में, होठों से होठों को चूमते और रहते हैं हम हर बात पे।
फिर से पैक करके रख देंगे। Damn bro, फाइनली अब जा चुका है टाइम टू गो रेडिएंट। क्या पीना है? ये क्या अटक गया हमें?
स्क्रीन बंद करके ASMR का सुकून दे म्यूजिक सुने और आराम करें। YouTube प्रीमियम मुफ्त आजमाएं।
अरे माँ कसम ब्रो, स्टोरी पोस्ट ही नहीं है। तो ना मस्त स्टोरी बनाया मैं। चला गया। तेरी मेहरबानी। मेहरबानी हो जा रे बाबा। हो गया हो गया हो गया। और गाइस एपेक्स का भी नया अपडेट आया, सो फिलहाल हम लोग खेलेंगे वापस। मैं माउस को आर के फुल बुम्बा इन रैंक कराएंगे। तो ऑल द पब्लिक मेहरबानी इसको भी यहाँ पे डाल देते हैं।
सुकून दे म्यूजिक चलाकर
Paste.
आपने सोने की तैयारी शुरू की और अब आप चैन की नींद सोने को तैयार हैं। स्क्रीन बंद होने के बाद भी अपना ASMR वीडियो चलाते रहें। YouTube प्रीमियम मुफ्त आजमाएं।
ओह जीजीस इसको डिलीट कर। My baby, my Valentine.
Girl, you they make my temperature they rise. If you let me, I go die. I swear, you are like the oxygen I need to survive. I'll be honest, your loving the totally me. I am so obsessed. I want to chop your neck up. Your body they bug me, see. Open up, make I see. Oh yeah, give me love quantity. Baby, make a Batman sing. Oh 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 जब वफा निकला मैं ढूंढने को जमाने में, जब वफा निकला पता चला कि गलत लेके मैं पता निकला, पता चला कि गलत लेके मैं
वफा निकला
सर्दी की
रातों में हम सोए रहे चादर में तन्हा। तुझको सनम ना जा ये दूरी
जो करता हमारी देता वो तुमको पता, शर्म है के पर्दे गिरा के करनी है हमको खता। तुम्हें जो मैंने देखा, तुम्हें जो मैंने जाना, तुम्हें जो मैंने देखा
जो मैंने जाना झूम बराबर झूम बराबर झूम बराबर झूम बराबर झूम बराबर झूम ना प्लीज डोंट
आपने अपने लिविंग रूम में गाइडेड मेडिटेशन वीडियो से शुरुआत की थी, लेकिन अब आप घर के बाहर योग का अभ्यास करते हैं। ऑफलाइन रहते हुए दिमाग को तरोताजा रखें। YouTube प्रीमियम मुफ्त आजमाएं।
आँख में खुजली अंदरूनी शांति मैं अगर तुम साथ हो तेरे सपने ओ भाई जोड़ हो गया ये तो। चलो कोई ना, अब कौन बार बार स्टोरी डिलीट करने वाला है? तुम साथ हो या क्या वो कितना लाइट फील हो रहा है यार, ना पूछो तुम। अब मेरे को इसका सिनेप्स वाला सिस्टम एक बार करना है यार। शिट मैन, एक्चुअली में क्या हो गया है दिक्कत कि ये आ गया, ये विंडोज अपडेट आ चुका है। रेजर अपडेट्स, चलो इसको भी अपडेट होने देते हैं। तब तक लेट्स रीड सम। Does Apex Legend Mobile release? नहीं पता भाई। Good news, Apex Legend 1 for iOS and Android on 17 May. Okay, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness box office grosses $500 million. Okay. How to destructure an array in JavaScript नहीं दिखना। Leaked Valorant mobile footage looks great. Now, can you get a console version? नहीं भाई, अभी एक तो आने दो तुम। Mahindra XUV 700 owner talks about things that he does not like in the SUV. ठीक है भाई. होती लफ्जों की धोखेबाज. क्या माउस है, देख रहे हो? यहाँ पे एक RGB यहाँ पे है और यहाँ पे नीचे है. So when you put it down, तो माउस पैड पे एकदम मस्त सा दिखता है. अरे यार मैं दिखाऊंगा कैसे. 360 ना घूम बेटा. अरे बेटे लाल. वो थोड़ा जीजी ट्राइपॉड है और हमारा वेबकैम भी थोड़ा जीजी है. स्वैप जीजी 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 समझ के जीजी से कुछ स्ट्रीम हो ना भाई. You guys, this not it may not function as expected during the update. Don't worry, this won't take long. Okay, bro. TCS BPS hiring for training नहीं करनी भाई. Why do junior employees resign after the company ends work from home? Whoa. After Elon Musk Taj Mahal tweet, mother shares throwback pictures. ठीक है. Google Wallet app is here to replace your physical wallet. Okay. Share pics with Shark Tank contestant whose company grew 40 times. Okay. 30 days later, ready Avatar the way of water. अवतार का सेकंड पार्ट भी आ रहा है. किसी ने अगर शायद वो देखा नहीं हो तो दिस रिक्वायर्स रिस्टार्ट टू कंप्लीट. वुड यू हैव टू रिस्टार्ट योर कंप्यूटर नाउ लेटर. नहीं भाई नहीं कर सकता. सॉरी ब्रो. वो लाइक चीफ मार्केटिंग ऑफिसर वरुण दुबे क्विट्स. सही है. तुम सब क्विट कर दो, मेरे को नौकरी दे दो. तुम्हारी ज़रूरत ही नहीं है मेरे को. निकलो. इसको कैम वेबकैम को यहाँ पे रहने दो. स्लाइड नहीं होने को. यार क्या लाइट वेट फील हो रहा है एज कम्पेयर टू माई ओल्ड माउस. वो ऑफिस माउस एक नंबर का बेकार माउस है. उसका सेंसर एक नंबर का घटिया है. वो देखना था ना स्ट्रीम कैप्चर हो रहा है कि नहीं. नाइस नाइस हो रहा है. सेटिंग्स कंट्रोल्स की बाइंड नहीं, ये नहीं. कीबोर्ड एंड माउस. हाँ ये एबिलिटी कहाँ गई. और QNC मच बेटर ब्रो. लेट्स गो. सेटिंग्स माउस 1.5 नहीं 1.2. रेडियस में इसको 1.0. ये प्रो लेवल्स वाले सेंसेस. ठीक है भाई, प्रो लेवल्स सेंसेस. सो और ये वन ऑफ माय फेवरेट bottles with my names engraved on it.
Let us be glad to accept the re's embrace.
पानी गर्म हो जाता है लेकिन अब तुझे पसंद है हमें तो इसमें से पानी. बॉटल भी रखो.
I cannot wait to win this match, friend.
देख रहे हो 339 किल्स है तुम्हारे भाई के।
This is your champion.
हाँ क्या लाइट फील हो रहा है, क्या स्मूथनेस है, ग्लाइड हो रहा है यार ये माउस पर। देख रहा हूँ, दिस इज व्हाट यू एक्सपेक्ट फ्रॉम अ नाइस नाइस गेम, नाइस। जरा महकता है बहकता है आज क्यों मेरा तन बदन, मैं प्यासी हूँ मुझे भर ले
I say we land here.
अपनी बाहों
Never mind.
I'm Jumpmaster, a curse and a gift. Why not land here? It is beautiful. Can you feel that? The heat of the flame calls to us all.
सॉरी गाइस अगर आपको साउंड ना आए बिकॉज ऑफ दिस, मेरा साउंड तो आ ही रहा होगा, थोड़ा जोर से तो चिल्ला रहा हूँ मैं। भाई ये गेम में बग से क्या?
Watch out, my friend. An enemy landed near me.
भाई इतना लैग क्यों है?
Chucking a thermite.
Attention.
If it is required, there is an extended energy mag here. Level 3.
First blood. Game bloody deep.
YouTube प्रीमियम से आप बिना विज्ञापन के वीडियो देख सकते हैं, वीडियो मोबाइल में डाउनलोड कर सकते हैं और वीडियो को बैकग्राउंड में चला सकते हैं। इसके साथ YouTube म्यूजिक प्रीमियम भी मिलता है। ये एक म्यूजिक स्ट्रीमिंग एप्लीकेशन है।
सॉरी
इसमें
गाइस,
आपको
सॉरी वेपन तो थोड़ा सही दे गई,
और आप बिना किसी
I can't do anything.
का आनंद ले सकते हैं। YouTube प्रीमियम को 1 महीने
और वे भी ये मेरे को पता है कि लैग हो रहा है मेरा।
Got us a new kill leader. Light ammo here.
The flame draws me this way.
अब एक ही चीज़ बाकी है लेने की, जो है मेरे को एक नहीं दो चीज़ें एक्चुअली मैं बोलूँगा, मतलब मेरे को इंटरवल में मेरे को नई चीज़ें खरीदनी पड़ देगा इसको, क्योंकि मेरे से वो चीज़ें संभलती है नहीं, और मेरे से टूट जाता है जल्दी बहुत चीज़। जैसे कि मैंने कीबोर्ड तोड़ दिया था, लेकिन अभी मैं आई डोंट हैव मनी टू बाय एनी कीबोर्ड, सो बता रहे टूटा हुआ क्या करे भाई। ये नहीं चाहिए, क्या स्मूथनेस लग रही है भाई माउस से भाई, आज के दिन सुन लेना ठीक है, इतनी मैं माउस के बारे में बजाना ना।
Barrel stabilizer here. Level 3. Grappling.
ये हवाई
30 seconds. I see an opponent here.
Gotta clown that away.
Watch drumming tutorials without Wi-Fi.
Throwing thermite
Jam
grenade.
uninterrupted. Try YouTube Premium for free.
Launching frag. Thermite grenade out.
Lifting the veil.
Attention. Delivery care package.
Care package incoming.
Target spotted.
Enemies right here.
Hurling Arkstar. Here comes the old knuckle cluster. Lean red.
Throwing grenade. Light out. Enemy close. Be great on bathing.
This dude's happy. Oh, no. Standing kill shot though.
Reloading.
Here. I am taking fire, friends. Cracked an enemy.
अरे बाबा गिलो सालो कमीनो कितना मारूं मैं ये सब एजेंट्स अभी नहीं खेलेंगे अभी यही खेलेंगे बस ये घुस के पेलम पेली वाले सानू कर इशारे कंगना तेरा नी सानू कर इशारे शिकारे एक तो दुनिया भर के अपडेट्स आ चुके हैं इसको भी अभी एग्जिट ऑल एप्स कर देना पड़ेगा I don't want lag.
You started with a K-pop dance tutorial
You started
and
with the
now
K-pop
you're a
dance.
Blackpink
The
super
advertisement
fan.
वाले तो
With
हद होती है
YouTube
भाई.
Premium, you get those tutorials uninterrupted and you get a dedicated music streaming app where you can go deeper into the album and more. Enjoy your videos and music ad-free and offline when you sign up for
If they got through,
Each choice changes everything. Speed isn't life. It just makes life go faster. This is your champion. Get ready for a light show. Jumpmaster Actual. Valkyrie has the ball. Let's make a varsity play for the deck. I love this part!
hostile over there.
Wow, first blood. Imagine passing out before even taking a sip.
Okay. Be aware of the new kill leader.
अरे आना रे बाबा
Wings up.
Please give me a bag.
Evo sheet
Dibs.
here. Level 2. Let's go. Peacekeeper here.
Backpack here. Level 2. I'll bag that.
I could use that. Barrel stabilizer here. Level 2.
Wings out. Medkit here.
ओ फ्लैटलाइन ग्राउंड वेपन में डाल दिया मस्त बैठेगा नाइस
Heat shield here. Wings up.
Warning. Room closing.
Coming in. Extended sniper mag here. Level 4.
Wings out.
Delivering care package. Heads up. Care package coming.
Watch League of Legends videos ad-free and learn to win uninterrupted. Try YouTube Premium for free.
Let's explore this way.
Optics here. Mid-range. Wings up.
Point
We
jumping.
can scan this area.
ये पिंग कितनी ज़्यादा किया है 135 किया है
Wings out. Wings up.
Fast charge.
Wings out. Shield battery here. Wings up.
Download your meditation videos and unwind uninterrupted.
Beginning
Try
ring
Unfound.
countdown. Wings out. Attention. Delivering replicator.
Replicator on high.
Affirmative. Got a bogey on my marker. Another bogey. Bogey spotted. One minute. Ring's pretty close. I found the next ring. Check your maps. Ring's close. Bogey there. Let's check this quadrant.
Recharging my shields.
Less than 30 seconds. Ring's nearby.
Maybe at me. I can't. Flag grenade set. Reloading.
Heads up.
Calling upon nature's strength. There's another squad. They're attacking. Taking a moment to recharge my shields.
Heads up. The ring's moving. Bogey in sight.
Evo shield here. Level 3.
Another bogey.
Going to explore here.
Care package coming down.
Evo shield here. Level 3.
That's got my name written all over it. bogey there. Hostile over there.
Let us go this way. Taking a moment to heal.
Hold up. Healing.
Defending from this way. Let's go. Scanning the area.
Next ring's not close, people. Let's scan this area. Hold up. Healing. One sec. Healing up.
Healing my wounds.
I'm down. Charging up my shields.
Putting up a heat shield. Deploying a heat shield. Lay low. I will assist you. Taking a moment to heal.
A minute till ring close.
This time I'm down.
The ring is far. Taking a moment to heal. Almost there. We are close to the ring.
Alert 5, ready to scorch for burn.
Use the net as your
Main
guide.
engine burn.
Save us from the gods.
Make sure seat backs, tray tables, and automatic weapons are in their full upright positions. Taking fire. Wings up.
Charging my shields.
Got a bandit in my sights.
Scanning the area. Recharging my shields.
Bogey spot. Cracked a bogey's shield. Reloading. Eat an arc star.
Beginning ring countdown.
Marking our surroundings.
Wings out.
Taking a moment to recharge my shields.
On that bandit.
All Father, give me some.
On that bandit. Reloading.
The enemy. Reloading.
Counting down from 16. The ring's close. Got another bandit. Wings up.
Marking our surroundings.
Only 2 spots left. On stretch.
Healing my wounds.
Down to us and them.
I am Kill Leader, a humble servant of the gods.
Evo shield here. Level 5.
30 seconds remain. Safety is an arrow shot away.
Talion bandit out there. Ring closing in 10. It's close.
Who scored last?
Warning. Ring closing.
The ring is moving, Felai fighters. No one is inside. Just box here. Might be something good this way.
There's a clueless bogey out there. Taking fire.
Tackling the enemy.
Rings out. One hit shield, you know now.
Putting up a heat.
One sec. Using my Phoenix.
I'm taking fire.
Begin ring countdown.
Deploying a heat shield.
Recharging shields.
Recharging my shield. Heat deployed here.
Hold up. Healing. Target spotted.
हो गया ना जी 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 यही होता है हमारे साथ एंड में आके एल लग गए मेरे एल लग गए बट ये वाले माउस से खेलने की फीलिंग यार कुछ और है क्या बोलूं मैं अभी एल लग गए मेरे 5 किल्स कैसे ये तो अब छोड़ो कहीं के लिए now we will see
Match found.
लीग ऑफ लेजेंड्स के वीडियो एड फ्री देखें और जीत का दौर जारी रखें बिना रुकावट। YouTube प्रीमियम मुफ्त आजमाएं।
Remember, wipe the prints from your guns. It's just good crime scene
Fight!
etiquette. Now, where to set up shop? Enemy down.
Dominating.
Put down. Fires out.
पहले 2 शॉट लगेगा बट क्या मान रहा
Dominating.
I have to again change my grip. Stupid asshole.
Dominating.
are removed.
10 kills remaining.
Listen to ASMR sounds with your screen off. For free.
One dead.
अरे यार मिस क्यों होता है ये शॉट्स ऐसे मस्त वन टैप
5 kills remaining. One kill remaining.
Goodbye. One down.
अब थोड़ा प्रैक्टिस करना पड़ेगा आ जाएगा
Hey guys, today I want to talk about something that is really, really important and you're going to use many, many times in the future. And this is the concept of the Python list. And the list is what you would call a data structure. What does that mean? Well, it's just a way of organizing and storing data in Python. Now, we've already seen ways of storing single pieces of data, and that was done through the simple variable, where we just said A is equal to 3 or B is equal to hello, but that's just storing one piece of data, right? Be it a number or a string. But sometimes you might want to store grouped pieces of data, data that has some sort of connection with each other. For example, if you wanted to store all of the names of the states in the US, then it doesn't really make sense to store them all individually because they kind of belong together, right? They have a relationship to each other. So it would be nice if you had a variable that was called states in the US, and then you would be able to store all of the names of the states together in one variable. Now, in other cases, you might also want to have order in your data. So, for example, if you were storing all of the people in a virtual queue, then you want to be able to keep hold of the order in which they join the queue. You don't want to let the last person somehow skip the queue because you don't have a good data structure, right? This is why we need to learn about lists. And lists look pretty simple. It's just a set of square brackets with many items stored inside. And those items can be any data type. They can even have mixed data types, like you could store strings together with numbers, or a set of booleans. It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is the syntax. In Python, lists always start with a open square bracket, like this, and a closing square bracket, like this. And then in between, you have your items separated by a comma. So pretty simple. In order to store it inside a variable, then it's the same way as we've done before. The only difference is the right-hand side of the equal sign. This is the list data structure. If we stored a bunch of fruits, for example, then it might look something like this: cherry, apple, pear, separated by a comma inside a set of square brackets. Let's take a look at this using real code. Now, I'm going to go ahead and comment out the code from our previous lesson on randomness, and you can do the same if you want to keep a note of the previous code and use it as sort of a live textbook where you can comment out the code or comment it back in order to see how it works, or you can delete it. It's totally up to you. Now, let's say that I wanted to store all of the names of the states of the US. Previously, without knowing about this list data structure, we might have written state 1 equals Delaware, state 2 equals Pennsylvania, and we call it a list. We add which is going to be extra. And with about the United States is that at different times. The order, if we want the union, then the order in which they're stored in our data structure is now also immensely important. And this is another thing that you get with lists. You can use lists to store many pieces of related data, but they also have an order, and the order is determined by the order in the list. So this is the first piece of data, this is the second piece of data, and when you store it inside the variable, that order is not lost, and you'll be able to use it later on when you need the list. Here's a list of states of America ordered by the date that they joined the Union, and you can see that if later on I decided that I wanted to know which was the state that joined first, then I can print this variable, states of America, I can add a set of square brackets, and then I type 0 as the index of the piece of data I want to pull out from my states of America list. So now if I go ahead and run this code, you can see it prints out Delaware, and if I keep increasing this number, you can see that it's going through my list in the order that it was saved. So you might be wondering, that's kind of weird that you typed 0 and you got Delaware, right? Surely Delaware should be the first item in the list. Well, this is a kind of peculiarity with computers and programming languages. You'll tend to find that programmers start counting from 0. So Delaware's at 0, Pennsylvania's at 1, New Jersey's at 2. And this idea might seem a little bit weird at first. Why is the first item at position 0? But if you think about that index number, that 0, 1, or 2, instead of being the position, actually being an offset or a shift from the start of the list. Well then, in this case, cherry is right at the beginning of the list, so it has a offset or a shift of 0, but apple is shifted from the beginning by 1, pear is shifted from the beginning by 2, and so on and so forth. Then it kind of makes more sense that the first item in the list is at the beginning of the list, so it has no offset, so it's 0. And you'll find that in many, many programming languages, there are similar data structures to lists, and this is how they're usually ordered, starting from 0 and then adding by 1. Now, you can see that when you want to get hold of a particular piece of data stored inside a list, what you do is you get the name of the list, and then you add another set of square brackets. So whenever you see square brackets, you should be thinking to yourself, oh, this might be related to a list. Because when you create the list, you use square brackets, and when you try to get items out of the list, you also use square brackets. And then inside the square brackets is where you put the index or the offset of the item that you want. So if we want a New Jersey, it's offset from the beginning by 1, 2. So now this part of the code is equal to New Jersey. And we could, if we wanted to, save it into another variable, or we could simply print it as we did before. Now, in addition to using the positive index, so say 0, 1, 2, 3, you can also use a negative index. So if I wrote -1 or -2, then it actually starts counting from the end of the list. So if I wrote States of America, square brackets, -1 as the index, then I get Hawaii. -1 is the last item in the list, because you can't really have -0. That's not actually a real thing in maths. Now, as I continue and I go to -2, then that's Alaska, -3 will be Arizona, and so on and so forth. So you can have positive indices and negative indices. But so far, we've only been pulling things out of our list by using our square brackets and the index. But you can also change the items in the list using very similar code. For example, if I decided that Pennsylvania is actually not spelled Pennsylvania, and I wanted to change it to Pennsylvania, then I can simply write my code like this. I get hold of my list, and then using the square brackets, I get hold of the item at index 1, which is this one, and then I set it equal to a new piece of data. So now, if I go ahead and print my States of America list, you'll see that the list looks a little bit different now. Instead of Pennsylvania, it's now Pennsylvania. So you can alter any item inside the list pretty easily using this kind of syntax. You can also add to the list if you wanted to. So for example, if you wanted to add an item at the end of the list, which is what happens most commonly, right? If you had a list of people who are queuing in your shop, then every subsequent person usually gets added to the end. If you have a new state that joined America, then it's probably going to be added after Hawaii. How do we do that? Well, we can write the name of the list, and then we use a function called append. And append will add a single item to the end of the list. So let's say that Angela Land is joining the United States of America. So now, once I've appended Angela Land to the end of my States of America list and I print the States of America, you can see there it is added right at the end. Now there's actually a whole load of other functions that you can use in addition to append, and you'll find this on the documentation for Python. In addition to the append function that we saw just now, where we add an item to the end of the list, there's a whole load of other functions that you can use with lists. For example, you can use the extend, which adds a whole bunch of items to the end of the list. And in this case, what you're actually adding is going to be a list. So I would be creating the list using square brackets and then adding my items in here. And now what's happening is I'm extending this States of America list with this additional list. So now if we print the States of America, you can see that these 2 items that used to be inside the list have now been added to the previous list, and it's now extended it by 2 more items. But the important thing is you don't have to memorize these functions. That's the whole point of documentation and why we have Google, because there's too much information in the world for you to memorize, and it's a very inefficient way of learning. And if you tried to memorize every single method, it's not impossible, but it means that you don't have space in your brain for the important stuff, which is how things work. How do you actually use it to do what you want it to do? So what I recommend when you come across a new thing, such as the list data structure, is to just have a look through the documentation, read through it, and see what are the possible things you can do. And once you've got the idea of this is possible, then the next time when you need to use it inside your code, you'll know, I remember, this is possible. And all you have to do is just be able to use Google to find the exact bit of the documentation and then implement it. Programming is kind of like an open book exam. You shouldn't need to memorize anything. You should spend your time trying things out and try to get things to work instead. Now that I've introduced you to this new data structure, the mighty list, it's time for a code exercise to see if you can use it in practice. So head over to the next lesson and give the challenge a go. With a comma and a space separating each name, and then the code will pick a random name from the ones that you've given it and tell you who is going to buy the meal. Now there's 2 lines of code here that you might not have seen before. Now this is something called split, and this allows you to split a string into separate components based on some sort of divider. So in this case, notice how it says hello, comma, from, comma, as Python. Now if we use the split on this string, then it will divide it up into a list and separate out all the words that are divided by this split character, which is the comma. Now similarly over here, when we give the input, it's going to be in the format like this. Everybody's names separated by a comma and a space. So now if we use the split on a comma and a space, then it will take out the comma and the space and it will put everything else as separate items inside a list. So what I recommend doing before you get started writing the actual code is to test it out. So print out what names actually looks like. So if we go ahead and run this code, and then we type a bunch of names separated by a comma, so Angela, comma, space, Ben, comma, space, Jenny, and then hit enter, then we hit the line where it prints names. Now names, as you'll see, is now a list with all the names I typed in, and while previously they were separated by a comma and a space, they are now all individual items in a list. The idea is that you've got all of these items inside a list. How can I pick a random one out of it using a random index based on the number of items in the list, which of course can change? And then how can I get a random name as the output and then print so-and-so is going to buy the meal today? So have a think about it, have a pause, and then see if you can complete the challenge. So now that we've got the list as a starting point stored inside names, how can we go about generating a random name and picking it out of the list? Well, we know that we can pick a item from the list by adding a set of square brackets and then a index number. So in this case, it should print the first item out of the list, which is going to be just the word Angela. And I can run this to prove this to you. You can see that names is a list of all the names, Angela, James, Ben. Names at position 0 is Angela, the first item. Now, how can we get a random number to replace that number 0? Well, we could use our random generator. Let's go ahead and import the random module, and we can say random.randint, and then we can specify the start and end. So the start is probably going to be 0, because that's where we start counting with our lists. But what is the end? Well, the end should be the position of the last item. But how can we know that position? What is that x going to be? Well, what if we got hold of the number of items in the list? So do you remember how previously we learned about the len function? Well, the len function can be used to get the number of elements in a list or the number of characters in a string. And if you take a look at this Stack Overflow question, then you'll see it in action. All that we have to do to get hold of the number of items inside this names list is to write len, parentheses, and then inside we put names, and now we can either store this or print this. Let's go ahead and first print what the value of this is going to be. Let's go ahead and comment out this line of code, and then run our code, and then give everybody's names separated by a comma, hit enter, and you can see that this line of code has printed 3. So the length of my names list is 3. So now that we've gotten hold of that, then we can probably use that number that comes from this len function inside our random generator, because we know that we can use this to get the total number of items in list. So in this case, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This last item is not at position 5 though, right? It's at position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we always need one less than the total number of items. And the range of random numbers we would want is num items minus 1. Now this line of code will allow us to generate random numbers between 0 and the last index. And I can store that inside a random choice variable and print my random choice. So if I run the code again, and it prints 1 this time, but the next time it might print print 0 or 2, because those are all the possible choices for a 3-item list. Now we can use that number to actually get hold of a particular item in our list of names. So we can say names, square brackets, and then we're going to use the random choice to get hold of the random item. And then we can go ahead and save this as the person who will pay, and we can print person who will pay plus is going to buy the meal today. So now let's go ahead and run our code again, and then give everybody's name separated by a comma, and then it says James is going to buy the meal today. And now we know that we've completed the challenge. Now you'll notice that in the instructions I told you that you're not allowed to use the choice function, and the reason for this is because if you search as Python and you search for the random module and you scroll down, you'll find that you can actually generate random items from a sequence such as a list by writing random.choice, and it will actually pick an item from that list. So let me demo what our code would look like instead. Instead of needing all of these lines of code, all we have to write is random.choice parentheses, and then we put our names list inside, and now it will do exactly the same as before, but with far less code. But this, of course, doesn't test whether if you've understood how indices work with lists, and whether if you're comfortable with the idea that the last index is actually one less than the total number of items, because we start counting from 0. I've made it a little bit harder than it needed to be, just to see how good a grasp you have on lists. Now I hope that you managed to complete this challenge. If not, don't worry, go back to it and see if you can replicate the logic that we talked about just now. And if you really struggle visualizing what these lines of code is doing, then you can always pass it through Thonny and use the debugger to step through it one step at a time and see what's happening at each stage. Now on the next lesson, we're going to see some more advanced parts of lists in action, namely how to nest lists inside other lists. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. Now, when you're working with lists, one of the most common errors you'll come across is something called the index out of range error. In fact, by this point, you might have already seen it. Now, what does it mean though? Well, let's take our states of America and let's delete the line where we added Angela Land and Jack Bauer Land, so we go back to the original. And you might remember that there are 50 states in America, but if you don't, because you're a programmer, it's as easy as writing len and then passing over the states of America, which will print 50. So now that we know that there are a total of 50 items in this list, and remember, because we start counting from 0, Hawaii is actually at index 49. So if we print States of America and then we try to get the item at 49, we hit print, you'll see that we get Hawaii printed. Now, what if we went one beyond that? What if we tried to get the one at index 50, somewhere out here? What do we get instead? Well, we get an error. It's called an index error. And this is because it's beyond Hawaii and there's nothing there, as we can see with our own eyes. But when you're working with large lists and you're not always looking at the data, then these errors can be a little bit more confusing. Very frequently, when you're working with lists, you'll end up with an off by 1 error. So it's unusual that you'll try to get something at index number 90 because that's just way beyond your list size. But very frequently, you might end up in a situation where you have some sort of value, say number of states equals len, and then we pass over the States of America, so this is going to be equal to 50, and then we pass that inside here as the index num of states, and then we hit run, and we get the same error, right, on line 16, where we try to get hold of this index in this list. It's again list index out of range. And this is an off by 1 error because all we need to do is just simply minus 1 so that 1 becomes 0 and 50 becomes 49. And then we get rid of that error. Now, it might be easier if we work with something a little bit simpler. Recently, I was reading online and I came across the so-called dirty dozen, where the environmental working group, a bunch of people, crunched through a whole lot of data, probably using Python, and they released their dirty dozen, a list of the fruits and vegetables that have the most pesticides. And it's kind of crazy that they actually washed and peeled all of these foods and then tested them for pesticides. And the list looks something like this, where strawberries are apparently one of the worst offenders for pesticides. So let's create a list of the dirty dozen. But you'll notice that some of these are fruits, like strawberries, apples, and other ones are vegetables. So how can we use our lists to still keep them inside the same sort of container, the dirty dozen, but somehow separate them out into fruits and vegetables? Well, we could just simply create two lists, fruits and vegetables. But these two lists kind of have a relationship, right? They're kind of related because they're all on the list of high pesticide foods. So how can we have lists within a list? Well, that's what's called a nested list. Instead of our original dirty dozen, we could create a new list called dirty dozen, and we set it equal to a list that contains two lists. It contains fruits and it contains vegetables. So now what effectively has happened is we've inserted this list inside here, and then we've inserted this list inside here. So we now have a list that contains two lists. And if I go ahead and print out this list, you'll be able to see its structure. And it looks like this. You'll notice that there's two brackets at the beginning and at the end, and the reason is because this is one list, this is another list, and this is also a list. So this is yet another way of using lists and just showing you the flexibility of this particular data structure. It's something that you're going to use a lot when you're writing Python code. Now that we've talked more about index errors, how to fix them, and also nested lists, you're ready to go to the next coding challenge. So head over there and give that a go.
Fruit appears -1 equals last में इसने मैंने इंसर्ट किया append I guess this one -1 पे जो भी था उसको रिप्लेस कर दो इससे मैंने then append किया इससे fruits vegetables in this let it be fruits and vegetables 1 मैंने dozens का इसका 1 fruits का 1 और vegetable का 1 इसका क्या होगा नेक्स्ट the question combines several concepts that she has seen in previous lessons in isolation. If the code is all confusing, I recommend breaking down on several print dirty dozens. ठीक है print out dirty dozen 0 print out dozen and see what happens. First का first, okay. First का first. First का first, yeah. 0th row, first row. K लाना चाहिए, I guess. बोला ना बे, it's mathematics, my bro. Mathematics is a
Alright guys, it's time for another code challenge. So head over to day 4.3 treasure map and take a look at what is happening here first. notice how we've created 3 lists here for you, row 1, row 2, row 3, and they've got some blank tiles in here. And these were just created with emojis. So if you just search for emoji and you come across the list of emojis, then you can simply just copy and paste them right into your code like that. So depending on whether if you're on Windows or Mac, you'll see the emojis display a little bit differently, but it doesn't really matter what it looks like. All that we want to do is to create almost kind of like a chessboard or a map like this. So we have 3 rows, and then we create another list that includes all 3 rows. So this map is actually a nested list because row 1 is a list, row 2 is a list, etc. And it's all put inside a list. Then we go ahead and print it so that we add a new line in between each row. And the final outcome looks something like this. So if we go ahead and just run the code, you'll see that we have almost like a chessboard, or essentially a 3 by 3 square, right? And the sort of way that we're going to navigate this map is by using some indices. So we're going to say that this is column 1, 2, and 3, and this is row 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you've ever played chess, or if you play chess with a computer, you'll know that the different moves or the different positions are often mapped out using letters and numbers. So, for example, if you wanted to move to this square, then it would be B4, right? Or if you wanted to move to this square, then it would be H3. In our sort of 3 by 3 map, the way that we navigate is first by specifying the column, the horizontal column, and then we specify a number for the row. So, for example, if I wanted to place my X marks the spot of my treasure, at this particular position, then it is 1, 2, 2 on the horizontal, so column number 2, and then 1, 2, 3, row number 3. So I would write that as 2, 3. And if I wrote 3, 1, then it means I want column 3 and row 1. So I want to mark the spot here. So when you run the code, the idea is that you should be able to specify a location using that 2-digit system, and you should be able to place an X at that location. Now, in order to do this, it will need you to review what you know about lists, what you know about using the index to change a particular item in a list, which you saw in previous lessons. And the added complexity is here we actually have a nested list, so lists inside lists. So have a play around with this code, and that's the really important word. It's play, right? There's nothing that could possibly go wrong. Just try some different lines of code, try doing some different things, and see if it actually prints out the outcome that you want, where, you know, when you specify a location, that's the place that gets marked with a capital X. Pause the video and try to give this challenge a go. All right, so let's try and solve this. So notice how at the very bottom of the code, I've got another print statement, which is going to show us the outcome of whatever code it is we write here. The first thing we probably want to do is get hold of the input position, right? We know that input always takes in a string. So even if we typed 2, 3, that's not going to be the number 23. It's going to be the string with 2 and 3 inside the string, something that looks like this. Now we can use what we've learned in previous days and previous lessons to split that string so that we end up with a horizontal position and a vertical position. That way we know, well, which column are they interested in and which row are they interested in. In order to do that, we tap into this position. And in order to get the horizontal, which we mentioned is the first digit, then we go ahead and get the 0th item out of that string. Remember, the string looks like this. So the 0th item out of the string is this one. And then the vertical is going to be the one at position 1. Now, of course, these are still strings as they stand right now. We've just split up this 2-digit string into horizontal and vertical. So this one, if 22 was the input, would be equal to 2, and this one would be equal to 3. Now, once we've gotten hold of the horizontal position and the vertical position, then we can go ahead and start specifying positions in our list. So we know that we've got our map, right, which is here, this nested list. And remember that it contains 3 rows. Now, if we want to get hold of the first row, then we would write map 0. If we want to get hold of row 2, then we would write map 1 and map 2 to get row 3. Now, remember that this is the vertical position, so this is the one that we're going to be getting hold of, or in this example, it would be the number 3, right? So we could say map passing in the vertical position. But there's just one problem, and I'll show you if I go ahead and print this map at the position vertical. Let's put in the example number, which is 2, 3, and you'll see that the problem is that list indices must be integers, whole numbers, not a string. Remember that we said these are still strings, so to convert them into integers, we use that integer conversion that we've seen before. So now both the horizontal and vertical are integers, and we can run this code again and see how it performs. Let's put 2, 3 in there, and we end up with the error that we learned about in the last lesson, which is index error. So it's out of range. So what's going on here? Remember that in our example, where the number is 2, 3, well then the horizontal is the first number, so it's going to be 2, and then the vertical is going to be the second number, so it's going to be 3, and then we try to get hold of that particular row from our map. Now, if we pass 3 into our map, then you can clearly see what's going to happen. There's 0, 1, 2. There is nothing at position 3. There is nothing that has been offset from the beginning by 3, right? So that doesn't exist. And this is why we get our index out of range error. So what do we have to do instead? Well, we have to remove 1 from it to shift it to row 3, because that's really what we're interested when we're writing this here, right? We can do the same by substituting the 3 with vertical, so it'll work with any number. And now if I run my code again, type 2, 3, then you can see that I get no more errors. And it actually prints out a row that I've selected, which is row 3. Now, you can of course change these just to make it a little bit more clear to yourself what's actually going on here. Let's type 23 again, and you can see that this is what's being printed. Now, the next step is, once I've gotten hold of row 3, how can I get the horizontal tile? So the horizontal tile we're interested in is the second one, so it's actually this one. So when we write 2, 3, then it's this tile that we're interested in. So instead of printing out this row 3, which we selected by writing this code, we can save this as the selected row. And then inside the selected row, we can get to the tile at the horizontal position that was specified. So we could say selected row at the position of the horizontal -1. This works the same way because our numbers that we're entering here, row 1, 2, 3, or column 1, 2, 3, they don't start from 0, so we have to shift it down by 1 in order for it to work. So now once we've gotten hold of the selected row using the vertical, and then the selected tile using the horizontal, well, now we can actually change it. And the thing we want to change it to is a capital X. So now if I go ahead and run my code, then you can see it works just as the instructions want it to work. So here's our map. Where do you want to put the treasure? If I write 2, 3, then it will put the treasure on column number 2, row number 3. Now if I run this code again, and I say, well, now I want to put it in column number 1, row number 3, then there it is. So this is now working for any possible combination that we come up with, as long as we're using the coordinates of our map. Did you manage to get it right? And did you write the code in a different way, perhaps? Because there's many, many ways. A selected row, we could simply just tag on this at the end, get hold of this particular row from the map, and because this is going to turn into a list, namely one of these, well then we can simply just use another square bracket to specify the column. And then we set that tile to a capital X. So depending on which format you find easier to understand, you can keep your code either like this or like this. This is obviously a lot more succinct, but it depends on whether this logic actually makes sense to you. So have a think about what happened here, and if you didn't manage to complete the exercise, then try to give it another go now. In the next lesson, we're going to tackle our final project of the day. So once you're prepared, and each saved to a variable. So what that means is that you can start out by just having a go at printing out, let's say, rock. And remember that these are variable names. They're not strings, so they don't need the double.
बाबा कल करेंगे इसको. चलो यार सोने का करते हैं, सोने का. Almost 3. Let's set up for sleep. और अब मेरे को गाने का इंतज़ाम करना पड़ेगा, बिकॉज़ क्या होता है ना कि गाने बंद हो जाते हैं, है ना? तो ये प्लेलिस्ट मेरे को देखना पड़ेगा कितने घंटे का है। प्लेलिस्ट। ये मीठी मिर्ची है ना, पता नहीं क्या होता है ना, ये बंद हो जाता है ना? तो कुछ जुगाड़ देखते हैं। तेरे को सेटिंग है क्या?
तुम पे रुके तुमसे चले लम्हे मेरे अब तो यहाँ राहें मेरी तुम पे थमी अब है मुझे जाना कहाँ तुम बिन चलूं तो कदमों से मेरे ये रूठ जाए जब प्यार हो हर बार हो तुमसे प्यार हो बेशुमार हो हर बार हो तुमसे
सुनते रहिए मीठी मिर्ची, लेटेस्ट बॉलीवुड मेलोडीज। मीठी मिर्ची, लेटेस्ट बॉलीवुड मेलोडीज।
तुम पे ही मरते रहे
यार ये नहीं अच्छा किया, वो वाली साइट बहुत बढ़िया थी, रेडियो इंडिया ये वाली। पता नहीं यहाँ से क्यों इन लोगों ने शूट किया, बंद कर दिया। दिस सेट हैज सो मच मेमोरीज मैन, क्या करें अब, वही से काम चल रहा है।
तेरी आंखों के सजदे में रहना पलकों के पर्दे में जब तक है जान तेरी बाहों की नरमी में सांसों की गर्मी में जब तक है जान तेरी आंखों के सजदे में रहना पलकों के पर्दे जब तक है जान तेरी बाहों की नरमी में सांसों की गर्मी में जब तक है तुमसे दो लफ्ज़ों में
ये साइट ये गाना को फॉरवर्ड कर रही है।
तुमसे कहना है यूं रहना है जब तक रातें जागेंगे रातों में तेरी बेमानी बातों में जब तक है जान कोरी कोरी शामों में गुनगुनाए कानों में जब तक है जान रातें जागेंगे रातों में तेरी बेमानी बातों में जब तक है जान कोरी कोरी शामों में गुनगुनाए कानों में जब तक है जान
जिंदगी के लम्हों में कुछ खास ढूंढती, मिठास ढूंढती,
सुनिए आरजे श्रुति को मंडे टू फ्राइडे मीठी मिर्ची पर।
आते जाते हंसते गाते सोचा था मैंने मन में कई बार, वो पहली नजर हल्का सा असर करता है क्यों इस दिल को बेकरार। रुक के चलना, चल के रुकना, ना जाने तुम्हें है किसका इंतजार। तेरा वो यकीन कहीं मैं तो नहीं, लगता है यही क्यों मुझको बार आते जाते हंसते गाते सोचा था मैंने मन में कई बार, होठों की कली कुछ और खिली, ये दिल पे हुआ है किसका इख्तियार। दिल तो बच्चा है जी।
बॉलीपीडिया।
हाँ, ये बात सच है कि आपका दिल सदैव के लिए बच्चा ही होता है, नादानियां जो करता रहता है हर दूसरे मोड़ पे। खैर छोड़ो, दिल की बात अगर करी दी है तो इस गाने को जिस मूवी ने अपने अंदर एकदम अमेजिंग तरीके से समाया था, उस मूवी की बात करते हैं ना यार। आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द फिल्म इश्क, रिलीज्ड इन द ईयर 2010। वेल, इस फिल्म में थे नासिरुद्दीन शाह, अरशद वारसी एंड विद्या बालन। व्हाट पावरफुल परफॉर्मेंसेस इंडिविजुअली। बट ये परफॉर्मेंसेस हमें जो स्क्रीन पे देखने को मिली, एक्चुअली इन कैरेक्टर्स के लिए जो फर्स्ट चॉइसेस थी ना, वो कोई और ही थे। लाइक इफ आई टॉक अबाउट विद्या बालन का कैरेक्टर, तो प्रीति जिंटा वाज द इनिशियल चॉइस बट शी टर्न डाउन द ऑफर। ऑल्सो नासिरुद्दीन शाह के रोल के लिए संजय दत्त वाज द फर्स्ट चॉइस। नॉट जस्ट दैट, द फिल्म इज इंस्पायर्ड बाय बर्च कैसिडी एंड द सनडांस किड। तो बाबू मोशाय, अगर आपकी जिंदगी में भी आपने अगर किसी को पहली बार अपने उस प्यार इश्क मोहब्बत के लिए चुना बट वो मुकम्मल ना हो पाया, तो कोई बात नहीं, बहुत सारी कुर्सियां हैं इस दुनिया में, ट्राई करते रहिए। बाकी तो समझदार को इशारा काफी। मिर्ची पे मैं हूँ श्रुति आपके साथ, स्टे ट्यून्ड।
बात एक ही है, क्यों दरमिया फिर रुकी रुकी, कह भी न पाए रह भी न पाए, क्यों बेवजह है ये बेबसी तुम में हम है, हम में तुम हो, तुमसे हम है, हमसे तुम हो, किस्मतों से मिलते हैं दो दिल यहाँ। हर किसी को नहीं मिलता यहाँ प्यार जिंदगी में, हर किसी को नहीं मिलता यहाँ प्यार जिंदगी में। खुश नसीब है हम जिनको है मिली ये बहार जिंदगी में, हर किसी को नहीं मिलता यहाँ प्यार जिंदगी में। प्यार ना हो तो जिंदगी क्या है, यार ना हो तो बंदगी क्या है। प्यार ना हो तो जिंदगी क्या है, यार ना हो तो बंदगी क्या है। तुझसे ही हर खुशी है, तेरे दम से आशिकी है, जान ले मिल जाए हम तो सब कुछ सही है, फिर इस तरह क्यों है अजनबी। तुम में हम है, हम में तुम हो, तुमसे हम है, हमसे तुम हो, किस्मतों से मिलते हैं दो दिल यहाँ। हर किसी को